Hello and welcome to C# Fundamentals with YJ.net. Now that we've learned about events, delegates, and event handlers, we're going to create a YJ application that showcases all of those concepts.
Okay, so next we're going to create a simple to-do list app. I have this pulled up in Microsoft Paint to just show sort of what the general structure of the app will look like. So we have a list of tasks on the left. We'll have some buttons near the bottom for add task and complete task. Whenever you select a task, over here it will show details about the tasks. So for example, right now the clean bathroom task is selected. So it shows clean bathroom, the bathroom, toilet, and sink need cleaned. And then on the left up here, it'll show the number of tasks. So in this case, there are 3 tasks remaining that need to be completed. Okay, so let's go ahead and build the UI. So I'm going to open up Visual Studio, create a new project. We'll do web page application. We'll call it to do app, and we'll hit create. This is all fine. Okay, let's open page1.cs. I'll go ahead and enter a new line and save. There we go. We can open the designer now. And here's our designer. Let me see if I can sort of pull this up on the left so we can compare. Okay, so let's go ahead and make some YJ controls. TasksRemaining 3 will just be a label. And we'll just say tasks remaining, and then we will update that throughout our code. This list here, this clean bathroom, buy groceries, do laundry, there are a couple of different options here. We could do a list box, we could do a list view, we could do a data grid view, we could do a data repeater. I'm going to go ahead and do a list box. So this is the list box documentation, and this is why I went with list box. It's very simple. It's pretty much just text, and you can select the different text things. And I want to do a really simple app. If you wanted to make it a little bit more complex, you could do something like a list view, and maybe you want to display a picture by each item, or maybe instead you want to do something like a data grid view, right? So maybe you've got a lot of columns that go with your data, right? Maybe you've got your task and then your time left to complete and then your person assigned to, or something like that. But in this case, it's a simple app. We're keeping it simple. We're just going to do a list box. So let's go ahead and create a list box. So there's our list box. And then we need some buttons for add task and complete task. And I'm just going to go ahead and do buttons for that. Add task. Complete task. And that would probably look nicer if I had icons, but again, I'm just going to keep it simple. Okay, so that's sort of this left side here done. Now we need this here, this piece that's going to be updated whenever we select a new task. So it's just going to have the task name and then the task description. And I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a user control that has 2 labels inside it, and then we'll update the labels as needed. So let's save that. Let's create a user control. User control, we'll call it TaskPanel. Add. Make that a little bit bigger. And we'll have a label. Let's go to the properties here of this label. Let's call it, let's see, this will be task name. And we'll go ahead and change the text. This text will get updated through code, but we may as well give it some default text. Say task name. Okay, and then we have task description. So there's label. Task description. And then for the name, we will call it task description. Okay, let's make those look nice. Put them up there. Let's see, task panel. Oh, we can go to background color. Sure, why not? Let's do this faint blue color. There we go, that looks nice. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to build the solution. It's important to build this because this compiles our task panel and makes it so it'll actually be something we can put in the designer. And now if I go to page1.cs, go to toolbox, I search for task, you can see ToDo app components task panel, right? So now I can click and drag that in. And now I have my little user control. Maybe I need to make it a little smaller. There we go. All right, so that's the UI completed. Let's go ahead and start working on the code. All right, there's one more thing we need to do to finish off this UI. I'm going to go ahead and click on these buttons. There we go. You'll see this is named button 1. I want to rename that to button add. And this button, button 2, let's rename that to button complete. And tasks remaining, we'll name that label tasks remaining. This is just to make things a little bit simpler so that when we see these values in our code, they're not button 1 and button 2, they're button add and button complete. They're a little bit more descriptive. Okay, the next thing we need to do is we need to add a task object because this list box here is going to be filled with task objects. So let's go ahead and add a new class. And there we go. Let me paste this in. It's pretty simple. You can see it has a name and a description, and in the constructor, it takes a string name and string description and just sets the name and the description up. So very simple. Later on, we'll add an action to this task, so it actually has like a method that it can run. But for now, we're keeping it simple. Okay. Let's go ahead and set up our list. Let's go ahead and add a load event to our page. And on page load, let's set up our list. Equals list of task, list equals new list of task. And you'll see it's got the nice red underline here because we need using systems.collections.generic. There we go. All right. And let's add some new tasks to the list. Task has two parameters, name and description. So I'm just sending in two things, our name, which in this case is clean bathroom, and our description, which in this case is the bathroom's toilet and sink need cleaned. Same for buy groceries and do laundry. Oh, I need a semicolon there. All right, so we've got our list set up. So I'm going to get my list box, which is listbox 1. We're going to set the data source. We're going to set that equal to list. And if you run this right now, you'll see there is a slight problem. Our list box is displaying our 3 tasks, but they all just say to do app.task. So we want to actually display the name of the task. We want to display clean bathroom, buy groceries, and do laundry. So in order to do that, I can set the display member. So listbox1 dot display member. It's auto completing for me. There we go. Equals name, and run that. And there we go. Okay, so that's our list set up. Let's go ahead and add a click event to our button and go ahead and add some items to the list. So for our add task, here we go. So that'll be the click event handler, right? So again, we've got our built-in YSJ event going on here. We're going to say list.add, and it's just going to have a just pre-built task. It's just going to say new task description. Oh, sorry, that should be lowercase l, right, for our list object here. Let's see. Oh, slight issue here. I can't actually access the list, so I need to go ahead and define it up here. Public list. List of task. There we go. Right, now I can access it in the button add handler. And for a more complete app, obviously you would have some kind of probably pop-up, where the user could enter the new task name and new task description, but we're just going to be keeping this simple. It's just going to be like that. Add task, and nothing happens. So they are getting added to the list. The problem is that the list box isn't updated. So what we want, instead of just a regular list, is something called a binding list. Using system.component model. There we go. And now we can get rid of using system.collection.generic because we're not actually using that. We're using system.component model instead. But now our list is a binding list. And now if I run this, you can see when I click on add task, it adds a new task. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to work on is the task selected event. So if I look over here at our list box, there is an selected value changed event. There we go, selected value changed. Event raised over the value of the selected value property is changed in list control. So let's double click on that to add that. And what we're going to do, display an alert box. Selected value changed. And we can run this real quick. So you see it goes off right at the beginning, and then whenever I click, it shows my alert box. So we can definitely tell the event is firing. What I want to happen is this task name and description should update. So when I have buy groceries selected, it should say task name buy groceries, task description, and then whatever the groceries description is. So let's go ahead and get that working. First, we need to access the selected task. So if I do listbox1 dot selected item, this is our task that's selected, although we need to actually cast it to a task. Otherwise, it'll just be an object. And let's store it. So task selected task equals, there we go. And we want to get our information out of that task, so our task name and our task description, and we want to populate those into our user control. So here's my user control, TaskPanel.cs. And if I right click view code, we can see our code here. Let's get that information out. So it's just going to be selected task.name and selected task.description. And in our task panel, we're going to go ahead and add a method. So it'll be public void update labels string name string description. And this will later on be a private method and will be communicating through events to let the task panel know it needs to update itself. But for now, it's just going to be public just so we can get something working and you can just kind of see it on the page. So our task panel is called task panel 1, right? That is this guy right here, task panel 1. And we're going to call update labels, and we're going to go ahead and send it the name and description. There we go. Oh, spelling errors, selected task and selected task. There we go. Okay, and then so it'll receive that name and that description. And then all I'm going to do is update the text. So if we look here, this is called task name is this label, and this is called task description is this label. So I'm just going to say task name dot text equals name and task description dot text equals description. There we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. And there you go. You can see it. So clean bathroom was selected, right? Just as the program started to run. And so it updated. So it says clean bathroom, the bathroom's toilet and sink need cleaned. Buy groceries, do laundry, right? So whenever I click on the task, it updates this over here. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do here is we're going to add an event. And that event will have our own custom event args, and that event will fire whenever a task is selected. Right, so this is the event that's the task panel is going to be listening to, and then it'll know to update the labels. We'll have another listener that knows to create an alert box. Okay, so let's go to page1.cs and let's create our event. So public event handler task selected. Oh, I misspelled event handler. Using system. There we go. And if this were just a regular boring event with a regular boring event args with nothing in it, this would be fine. However, we need to create a custom event args because we need to pass a task with this event. So in brackets, I'm going to put the name of our custom event args, which will just be task event args. All right, there we go. And let's go ahead and actually create this task event args. So I'm just going to put it in task.cs. It's not a part of our task class, but this seems a good place to put it so it won't get lost. I'm going to say public class task event args, which is derived from event args. We have a public task. I'll just call it task item. We just have get. We don't really need set. Okay, and then we need a constructor, public task selected event args task item. And task item equals task item. Okay, that should be set up. Oh, task event args, sorry. There we go. Okay, so now if I go back to page1.cs, you'll see that is no longer underlined, so we're good there. So we've created our custom event args, we've created our event, and there are two more things we need to do. We need to listen to our event, and we need to invoke our event. Let's go ahead and invoke our event first. So listbox selected value changed. So this is when our event fires, right? Task selected dot invoke. We're going to send it two things, object sender and event args e. So our object sender will just be this, and then our event args is our task object. So actually, I should move this down because I need to send it selected task. Oh, that's right. I need to send it the event args, and the event args contain the selected task. Sorry, so let me fix that. So new task event args, which contains selected task. There we go. Okay. And then let's go ahead and grab that. Actually, we'll grab both of these because this is going to be the code for what happens when our event fires. Right, so we're invoking our event, we're firing our event here, and then what happens when that event fires, right? A listener does something. So in page 1, our constructor here, I'm going to do task selected, which is the name of my event, plus equals, and then we're going to attach a method to it. And I'm just going to be really simple here and just create a method. There we go. All right. So we'll see we have a slight problem here, right? And we no longer have selected task, right? Remember we had selected task. We sent it through the task event args, but now we have to access it through the task event args. So the task event args are going to be E, right? This E here. So e dot, and if I look at my task event args, task event args have a task item. So it should be e dot task item. E dot task item dot no longer need selected task, and the name and description are the same as before. So now we have e.taskitem.name, e.taskitem.description. All right, semicolon there. This, by the way, is called a lambda function. This nice little built-in function. They're handy little things. All right, so let's go ahead and make sure that this still runs. Selected value changed, so it says selected value changed, and it updates over here. So we are good to go. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to move this code into TaskPanel.cs, and we're going to make the UpdateLabel method private. So let's go ahead and grab this code. We're going to do a method on task selected object sender eventargs e. And we're going to put that code right there. Except in this case, we don't need the task panel one, we just need to say update labels. And instead of eventargs, we want task eventargs. Okay, there we go. So now we just need to attach to the event and call this method. So the event is over here in page1.cs. It is right here. So we need access to that event. And in order to get access, we're going to create an attach method. So I'm just going to say public void attach. We're going to have a reference to the page, which in our case the page is of type page1, right? Derived from page. And we're just going to say page dot task selected, so that's our event. And we're going to attach to our event, and we will just do on task selected, right? So this is our event, and this is our event handler, which will be listening to the event. So whenever this event fires, this method will be called, and this code will run. Let's go back to page 1. In the page 1 constructor, I'm going to add this code. Task panel 1 dot attach, and then we need a reference to the page, so I'm just going to send it this. And let's test that out to make sure our code still works. If I click on buy groceries, it shows that. Do laundry shows that. So our code is still working. Okay, so what is the point of this? I just did a bunch of code and the functionality is the same, right? All I did was change some things behind the scenes. Well, first of all, I wanted to show how you can have multiple handlers listening to an event, right? So we have our task selected event, and we have this handler right here in page1.cs that shows the alert box. And we also have this handler here in taskpanel.cs that shows update labels, right? That updates the labels. So you can have multiple handlers listening to an event. When the event fires, you can have multiple functions that do things. So that's sort of a demo thing, right? But why would you actually do this in your actual project? Like, what's sort of the architecture reason? So by removing the call to update labels in page1.cs, we've made it easier to change that code. Now you only need to edit taskpanel.cs in order to change this code here, right? So imagine if this were a huge code base with multiple programmers working on it. You can make a git commit that only edited taskpanel.cs, and perhaps you can avoid merge conflicts by not editing page1.cs. Because imagine, maybe page1.cs is this giant file with all of these components, and everyone's editing it, and you want to avoid editing it if you can. The other thing we've done is we've made it easier to switch out taskpanel.cs. So let's say you made a new or different type of task panel. We've made it easier to switch that out. The only code that you need to do is create your new task panel and then attach to the page, and then all the other functionality is inside of TaskPanel. Okay, so there's a couple of pieces of functionality missing from our app. So you'll notice this tasks remaining doesn't update, right? Whenever I add a task, it doesn't update with the new amount of tasks. And complete task doesn't do anything, right? I can select a task and complete task doesn't complete it. There's also the fact that completing a task needs to update this tasks remaining. So let's work on that. We're going to go ahead and add some new events. We're going to add an event public event handler task added and an event for it's auto doing task remove, but I'm going to call it task completed. So we've got new events. In this case, I don't really care about whatever task was added or completed, so I'm not going to send the task event args. So it's just a plain event handler, just a plain event. Okay, we've got our events created. Let's go ahead and write some code for what happens when these events fire. All right, so let me paste in some code here. So here we go, public void update tasks remaining. We're going to take our label TaskRemaining.text. It's going to say tasks remaining, and then it's going to say list.count. Right, if you remember, our list is our list of tasks. So we've got our events created. We've got our code that we want to run whenever our events fire. So let's go ahead and attach these. So I'm just going to say task added plus equals update task remaining and task completed plus equals update task remaining. There we go. And we just need to invoke these events now. So let's see, when should these events fire? Well, whenever I add a task or complete a task. And that happens whenever I click on the buttons. So button add, I want to fire it. So task added dot invoke. And again, remember, we're not sending it a task because we are just using the regular event handler. So we're just going to send it this for object sender and then new event args. And then whenever we complete a task, we need to invoke it as well. So let's add that code. There's our complete task, and I can just double click on it. That'll create the click event. So we will be invoking task completed. And the other thing that happens is we need to actually remove the task from the list. We're going to get our selected task, and then we're going to remove that selected task from the list, and then we'll invoke TaskCompleted. So let's see how this works. Okay, so add task, task remaining 4, 5, 6, and then complete task. That works as well. So one issue I have is that when I start the app, task remaining is blank, right? It should say task remaining 3 because there's 3 tasks here. So what's going on is whenever I click on the button to add task, it adds a task to the list and invokes TaskAdded. But when the page loads, I added 3 tasks to the list and I never invoked TaskAdded. So I'm going to take this and just put it here. I don't need to invoke it 3 times because all it does is check the amount in the list and add that to TaskAdded. So I just need to do it once. Perhaps if you wanted to do something like every time a task is added, display an alert box or something, you might have to do it for each item in the list. But in this case, we only need to invoke it once. So let's go ahead and run this. And now we have task remaining 3, complete task, task remaining 2, add task, task remaining 3, add task, task remaining 4. So it's working now. Now there is a bug in this app. If I go ahead and hit complete task, and I hit complete task on the last task, so there are no tasks remaining, we get an error, a null reference exception. So on task selected is trying to update the labels, but there's no task selected, right? It's null. I've deleted the last task. So let's go ahead and fix this. So on task selected is called whenever the task selected event fires, right? If you remember, we attached to the task selected event, which is this event right here. So one thing we can do is look at whenever that event is invoked, which is in listbox selected value changed, and we could do this. So if selected task is null, return. So then task selected would never be invoked, and this code here would never run. Well, not never run, but it wouldn't run when there are 0 tasks remaining. So let's try out that fix. Complete task, complete task, complete task, and it works. Now there is a second way you can fix this, which would be to go into the task selected. So on task selected, we can check here. So in the task event args, there is our task item, right? Remember, we're using our task item.name and our task item.description. Our task item is the task object, so we can check it there. We do, however, need to check it in one more place, because remember, we attached to that event twice, right? We have the task selected event handler here, so we'll go ahead and do that here. And now if I run it, and hit complete task, now we're good. So I'm just going to go ahead and add that back into the selected value changed. So it's a little redundant. We've sort of fixed it twice, but it should make our code more robust and hopefully keep this bug from popping up again. Okay, so there's another bug. Let's go ahead and complete all of the tasks. And you notice it still says clean bathroom. So this needs to be blank when all of the tasks are completed. So let's go ahead and fix it. I'll do a quick and dirty fix, and then we'll do a better fix. So the quick and dirty fix would be when the button completed is clicked, we're just going to go ahead and check and see if the list.count is 0, so there's nothing left in the list, and then do TaskPanel.UpdateLabels and send it empty strings. So let's run this. And it works. So the problem with this fix is that I'm accessing the update labels function, which I actually meant to make private. Let me go ahead and make that private now. Right? Because we wanted to keep that functionality inside of the task panel so that if we had a different task panel, we could easily switch them out. We don't want to be calling that from inside of page 1. So you'll see now it's complaining about update labels because that's private. And let's go ahead and complete the better fix. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an event. So here is where we're going to fire the event. So let's add our event. Public event handler. It's auto doing task remove, but what I want is no tasks remaining. And let's go ahead and invoke it here. So no tasks remaining.invoke. We're just going to send it this for the reference to page 1, and then new eventargs. The eventargs are blank because there is no task eventargs or anything like that going on here. So we've created the event, we've invoked the event, and then we need the code that runs whenever the event is invoked. So let's add that. So whenever there's no task remaining, we'll just show an alert box that says all tasks completed. And you could definitely do more advanced things here, but we're just going to keep it simple with an alert box. And now the other thing we need to do is actually use that event inside of TaskPanel, right? So just like how we attached to the task selected event before, we can attach to this new event. So page dot no task remaining plus equals, and then we need our method that we're going to call. I'll just call it on no tasks remaining. And let's create that method. And that is just going to call update labels, and we're just going to send it to empty strings. So update labels and 2 empty strings. Okay, let's test this out. So if I hit complete task, complete task, complete task, task remaining 0, and it is blank. So there we go, we've successfully fixed the bug. Okay, so there is yet another bug here. If I select something, like say buy groceries, and then click on complete task, you'll see do laundry is now selected, but it still says buy groceries, we need milk and eggs. So whenever I complete a task, this task panel here isn't updating to show the newly selected task. So let's go ahead and fix that. If I look at my button complete click code, I can add something here. We can add an else statement, right? So if list.count equals 0, we call no task remaining, or rather we invoke no task remaining. else, let's go ahead and get the selected task, and we'll call it new selected task, right? And this is different from this because after this code runs, the list.remove, right, it selects a new item from the list. So we've got our new selected item, and then we're just going to invoke task selected, because if you remember, task selected has some code that updates the task panel, right? If I go to task panel here, right, we attach the task selected, and then on task selected, this code runs, right? And this is what updates the labels. This is what we need to run, essentially. We want this code to run whenever a task is removed from the list. So task selected dot invoke, we're going to send it this, and we will send it new task eventargs, and inside of that task eventargs, we will send it new selected task. Oh, I need a dot here. Task selected dot invoke. There we go. Oh my gosh, what is autocorrect doing? There we go. There we go. Okay, let's test this out. So I've got clean bathroom selected. I hit complete task. Buy groceries became auto-selected, and we can see it over here. Same with do laundry, complete task. Buy groceries is selected. We see it over here. So the bug is fixed. Now we're going to work with actions. An action is a way to store a function so that you can call that function later, and you can pass that function around like a variable. One thing to note is that action only works with functions that return void. If you have a function that actually returns something, you would need to use func instead of action. But anyways, let's go ahead and get started. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take our task object and I'm going to add an action to it, because what is going to happen is that each of our tasks will have their own action, and then we're going to call that action when that task is completed. So they're each going to have their own custom function that happens when that task is completed. So let's go ahead and add an action here. So we'll say public action and I'm just going to call it action, and then to our constructor we will add this here, action equals action. There we go. And now if I go back to page1.cs, you'll see it's complaining about all of these tasks because they all need actions. So there are two ways to add an action, or add a function for our action rather. I'll show you both. The first one is what it's showing in the autocomplete here, but I'm just going to type it out. So in our task, right after our new task description, we're going to add a comma, right, for a new parameter, and then open and close parentheses. So this is our parameter list for the action, and remember there are no parameters, so there's just nothing inside the parentheses. Then I'm going to add an arrow. Oh, there we go. So open and close parentheses and arrow, and then we're going to add our code for what happens when the function is run, which in our case will just be an alert box. And we'll just say task completed, right? Okay. So it's complaining at me here because I have some open parentheses and I haven't closed them. So we need to close this parenthesis. and close this parenthesis and add a semicolon. And I should be good here. Oh, I need alertbox.show. There we go. Okay. One thing to note here, I only have one line of code in my function, so I can get away without having a semicolon at the end, and I can get away without having brackets. If I wanted to have multiple statements, I would need to do brackets like this. But they're optional if you only have one statement. Oh, sorry, brackets like this. I put the bracket in the wrong spot there, but that should be good. Oh, and now that I have the brackets, I need a semicolon. Okay, so let's go ahead and add methods for our 3 tasks. So let me just copy this real quick for the bathroom. Make sure to put it in the right spot. There we go. And we're going to show a message box instead of an alert box. And instead of saying task completed, this is the bathroom. So I will just say bathroom cleaned. Okay. Again, we're using this type of a lambda function and anonymous function that we're just sending in. So I'm not actually giving it a name. It's just created inside of this list.add. Okay, for buy groceries and do laundry, I'm just going to go ahead and create some functions. So let me paste those in. And here we go. So we have groceries method and laundry method. And we have our messages and our button, which in this case is the OK button for both of them. And then the icon, which we have an error icon and a warning icon. So all I'm going to do here is pass in the method name. So groceries method. And this one will get laundry method. So notice we've got 2 different ways here, right? You can either create it inside here, or you can do the more advanced one and just have a function that is created outside and then passed in. So either way is fine. Honestly, these are also simple. I probably could have done them either way. If you've got a more complex method, you'll probably want to do it this way. And if you've got a more simple method, you'll probably want to do it this way. There's one more thing we need to do before we can run our program, and that's to actually make sure that the actions are called, right? So the actions are called when the complete button is clicked. So here's our button complete click. So we get our selected task, we remove our selected task. So let's do it before it's removed from the list. I'm just going to say selected task dot action, and that's it. Remember, this is called action because we named it action here, but you don't have to call it action. You could call it whatever you want. So it's going to be based on whatever name you used inside of your class here, not necessarily called action. Okay, let's go ahead and run this. And let's go ahead and add a new task as well. So if I click on clean bathroom and then complete task, I see bathroom cleaned. Do laundry, complete task. New task, complete task. That was just the task completed, right? The alert box. Buy groceries, complete task. Store was out of eggs. There we go. All right, so that is events and delegates and actions and how to use them within WiseJ. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Bye.